Hello, friends. I hope you are continuing to enjoy our journey through the Red Sea and our Exodus experience with the people of God. In our text for this week, we see this beautiful or meaningful, significant connection between instruction and promise. It's really the nature of covenantal relationship. Some of us in some of our small groups talked last week about God's promise, but it also needs to be met with our obedience. And we have a clear example of this. You can imagine if an employer was in a crunch time and said to an employee, hey, I'll pay you double for any hours you can work this week. And that's an incredible promise. What a blessing and benefit that would be. But if the employee doesn't work any hours, what happens to that promise? The employee can't avoid work all week and then go to the employer at the end of the week and say, hey, I'd like to get paid that incredible promise. What's the employer going to say? Well, did you work any hours? So that wonderful promise or opportunity comes with an expectation or instruction. Obviously, the employee has to work the hours in order to experience the blessing and the promise. And that's really what covenant relationship is with God. God gives us promise and blessing and possibility, but it also our freedom and how we live our lives, the decisions we make determine whether or not we experience that promise or that possibility that God has in mind for us. And we certainly see that in effect in our text for this week, Exodus chapter 14. Let me read verses 13 and 14 for you again, just to remind us. Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid." Now we know that this comes at a crisis point where the Israelites have all kinds of reasons to be rightly afraid. But Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid." So there's instruction. Stand firm, instruction, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. So there's the promise. So you see this interaction between instruction and promise. Do not be afraid. Stand firm is the instruction. And the promise for faithful obedience to those instructions is you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Lord will fight for you. Now we just reverse the process a little bit. Promise first. You only need to be still. There's the instruction. And so we see in this verse, or these two verses, this connection between instruction and promise, instruction and promise. And the big idea here for the Israelites is God is at work for them. Their instruction is to trust, to wait, to give God time to work. Now, the Red Sea is going to open, and they are going to have to move forward. When we talk about giving God time to work, it doesn't mean that our job is to sit idly, to do nothing, to be inactive. Much of our resolution to the crises that we face requires our action. But when we talk about giving God time to work, it means we let God lead the way in our resolution. It doesn't mean do nothing, but it means let God lead in what you're doing. When we face crisis in our life, our own Red Sea moments of uncertainty, of fear, feeling trapped or grief, the reality is we get a lot of action items, a lot of instruction from various sources. We might be going through crisis and someone says to us, or we feel, I just need to take a vacation. That's how we're going to resolve this. Or someone might say, hey, you just need to start dating again, or go see a psychic, or you know what, let me take you out for a few drinks. You just need to blow off some steam. Right? When we go through hardship, when we go through crisis, loss, grief, frustration, disappointment, discouragement, we have all kinds of instructions from our own mind, from our own temptations, from the world, from people who are trying to do good. You need to go see my doctor, or start taking this medication, or whatever it is. We have all kinds of instruction that comes from the world, from our own temptations, from our flesh. But when we talk about giving God time to move, it doesn't mean we are idle. It doesn't mean we have nothing to do. It doesn't mean we have no responsibility, but it means we allow God, God's word, God's wisdom, God's guidance to take the lead in what our resolution will be. Here at this moment on the banks of the Red Sea, the Israelites were tempted to be frantic. We saw just before this, they cried out to Moses. We had a little technology glitch there, and ironically, I am usually tempted to be frantic when technology breaks up. I think, I got to restart and do the whole thing. But here's an opportunity to let God have space. Anyway, we see in this text the Israelites were tempted to be frantic. Why did you bring us out of Egypt? Were there not enough graves in Egypt? And they're in this moment of crisis where they've got to breathe. They've got to pause. They've got to give God time to move. God is about to open up the Red Sea. God will create a path of rescue. They will have to act. They will have to trust God and walk through the parted Red Sea, which is a great act of trust. But in this moment, they've got to pause. They've got to be calm. Do not be afraid. Stand firm. Trust that God is about to deliver them. That's what it means when we talk about giving God room to move. In our times of crisis, when we're tempted to be frantic, to just pause, calm ourselves, and give God time to work. And be ready when we see where God is leading. I hope this reminder blesses you. Red Sea, rule number 4, give God time to move.